The hominins, those species most closely related to us, also mostly extinct. In this lecture, I'd like you to be able to compare hominin species in brain size, tip structure, and dentition. List and define the genera and species of hominins. List when different genera existed and gives features that made them successful. So how are we related to other hominids? Let's take a look at the early hominids. Some would say that it is this kind of scala naturae. It's kind of starting with one, and it's a linear, progressive evolution of a single lineage with a bigger brain coming along and more stable, upright gait coming along at each time. Or it could be an evolutionary radiation where good adaptations led to a lot of different experimentations upon a theme, and some of which survived and some of which did not, and ultimately there could be only one. So these are two different thoughts, and let's take a look through these. The earliest hominins were, well, ape-like. Oh, we are ape-like, we are apes. They're chimpanzee-like, really. So we have the Sahalensis chadensis. What we can see here is we have a very few species, very few samples. This is kind of one of the problems. They didn't fall into swamps and get covered by sediment and get fossilized well. These are desert-dwelling animals, so we don't get very many good fossils. These are ones that would be on savanna, deserts, forests that are kind of fragmented. The teeth kind of resemble ours from some of these earlier hominins. It hits at a diet that was a little more broad instead of being strictly plant-based, strictly insect-based, or strictly meat-based. Definitely not strictly meat-based. So this was about 6 to 7 million years ago. It's likely that the Sahelanthropus chadensis was coexisting with other ancestors of chimpanzees and bonobos. So these were probably organisms that were not walking upright, and they did not have the larger brain that we now see and we now have. And there are very limited fossils of these. These crumbled skull is pretty much one good example of how hard it is to really see what's going on. You don't see the hips. You don't see the stature. There's no spine. It's just the brain case. And the forma magnum is absent. So you don't know if it's close to the back, close to the front. So the big question, though, is were we walking upright first, or did we have a bigger brain first? And it's a classic question of these two very human traits. Which came first? And we can look at this in these in the Australopithecine humans. So we have Australopithecus here. Now that's a terrible name, by the way. Austro meaning south, Pithecus meaning southern ape, basically. It's an E, isn't it? Australopithecus is southern ape, and then it would be Australopithecus afarensis and africanus, and these are Latin names. So Australopithecus is Greek, afarensis africanus is going to be Latin. It's a mix-up we generally don't have, but it took. What we see with these, the teeth are more adapted to meat and softer food, and this is specifically in the gracile Australopithecines. There were different ones existing at the same time. There's the gracile and the robust. We'll cover robust next. And these gracile ones were more adapted to eating meat, really. They weren't ready to eat roots unless those roots had been cooked first. So berries would be a good example for what these could eat. So various fruits would be something on the diet. The bone structure was a lot more delicate. So we're not talking gorilla at this point. We're talking something that was walking, indeed, upright and had a smaller brain compared to us, of course. And what happened is this erect posture likely evolved first in certain types of foraging around. And we have the example here of Australopithecus afarensis. This is afarensis. There's also africanus. This is showing where we were. We were in eastern Africa. So talking Ethiopia, Kenya, the Olduvai Gorge area is near this Rift Valley. So it's a geologically active place, and we do see footprints in ash. So we do see that we were living in a geologically active place in Africa, Eastern Africa, eating berries and eating meat. And that's what these gracile Australopithecines were doing. Now, at the same time, there are also the robust Australopithecines, and that would be the genus we now call Paranthropus. It used to be called Australopithecus boisei or Australopithecus robustus. We now see these as a separate branch on the family tree. So it definitely is not this single lineage, because you get guys like this. They were erect. They stood erect. They had a much smaller brain, but then they had these ridges on the top of the jaw for attaching the muscles that would move the mandible. So these muscles were very strong to chew things like grasses and sedge roots. And the species we're looking at here is Robustus. But Boise as well. You can see the skulls of these on campus. Strong jaws, strong ridge on the top, strong bite. They were herbivores, almost certainly entirely herbivores, whereas gracile Australopithecines were omnivores. So you have two different niches being occupied at the same time by relatively larger brained organisms. I say relatively because you're comparing them in body size versus brain case to monkeys, baboons, and lions. These are smarter organisms, bigger brains, but they're eating different things. So there has been an adaptive radiation towards those bigger brain towards upright walking apes. There's been kind of an adaptation to doing that, and it's opened a niche for them, and they've taken two different parts of that niche. And this is where we're going to get to a new niche opening up. The genus Homo is going to be able to do some new things. They are definitely have an erect posture, and the brain case expands greatly here in such examples as Homo habilis. So Homo habilis used to be called Australopithecus habilis, and it's now seen more to be in our genus of Homo. So larger brain cases being about 500 to 1200 cubic centimeters, and these are around 1.9 million years ago that they existed. So Homo habilis is a tool maker. It's called a man. It basically just means handyman. So these are organisms that are making and planning out tools according to a certain structure and plan that they know. So they were capable of increasing their niche because they were able to cut meat off of bones. And one hypothesis is that they would see lions make a kill, and when the lions have finished theirs, they see the lions walk away, go drowse into the shade, and then these little apes would run out with sharpened rocks and cut the tendons of meat off the bones, take this meat away, and with their free hands, and go sit on the rocks of their own. So they would be able to just steal lion kills to an extent. These tools could be used for various things, in increasing their ability to forage. So this is a new niche that has opened up now in this tool making ability. The niche increased with Homo erectus, the most successful. What do you mean the most successful? Well, they lived the longest. They lived for between 1.2 and 0.4 million years. So they lived for 800,000 years. So we've been around roughly a quarter of that. So what we find tools everywhere. So they left Africa. They were good enough that Homo erectus was able to stand up and just get out of there. We do know they used fire. So they understood to an extent the use of fire. So with sharpening sticks and getting that wood nice and fire cured, so it's a little harder, they understood how to do that. Using fire to clear the savanna, to make game stampede and increase the chances that they'd have a nice kill, they knew how to do that. Knowing how to use certain tools to indeed kill their prey. Yes, they knew how to do that. They were smart enough to get a sharpened rock that looked like a disc, and they would they'd get up close enough to a watering hole that were within throwing range, and they'd heft it up, and they were likely able to capture what it hit, because it would hit something that that animal would stumble, would take a massive laceration. This would make everything else, it would cry out, everyone else would panic, and they'd trample it. And there we go, tenderized meat. All I had to do was throw a rock into a watering hole. So Homo erectus was definitely using fire, using tools, apex predator. And that is a big difference, because now you have a creature that has gone from eating berries and fruits and living kind of as a scavenger maybe, to this is an apex predator capable of manipulating its environment. Big new niche, big brain size, and lived for 800,000 years before going extinct. They have some subspecies of this, of course, and one of them would be called the Neanderthals. Now, subspecies of what? Well, they're all very similar. You see, Homo erectus actually had a brain case that was variable enough to include brain cases of modern humans. So there's a lot of variability within Homo erectus. And one of the species that came out of this would be Homo sapiens, and we might say Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. So were they the same species as us? We're going to get into that later. So the Neanderthals here dressed in a suit, you probably recognize them as just a very ugly person. I mean, we've seen ugly people. With a mask on, covers the nose well enough, you might not even realize they're different. It's whether or not they're different species is up for some debate. They were definitely a species of human, or a group of human, that was more adapted to cold climates. They were predators. They were brilliant predators. And their body was able to take a lot of hits from large herbivores that they were preying on. There's evidence of care. There's evidence of burial. Are they truly extinct? Well, there's some questions for the next lecture. There's definite evidence that they interbred with Homo sapiens variety sapiens, which is, of course, our last species. So Homo sapiens, that's us. There's your monkey right there. Anatomically modern humans. The first ones were found in Java. Now that's going to tell you that the first one, I say that the oldest ones are found in Java, they arose in Africa. We'll come back to the out of Africa theory next time. I just want to let you know, we didn't arise in Indonesia. We're going to talk about that later with how we knew where we came from. Now I'm probably going to leave the class in suspense, but I'm not leaving you, dear watcher, in suspense, just in case this is the only one you're watching. So we know that this is using tools, has fire, art. We start seeing things that are definitely artistic, definitely kept around for no practical hunting value, perhaps trade. So we hypothesize that these people were using that extensive brain case to be creative. In other words, there may have been some creativity among the Neanderthals, and we definitely see the ability to make tools with erectus and habilis, but we see new tools being made. We see a lot of tools being played with. There's evidence that humans were definitely making religious icons of some regard pretty early on. So how do we know where we would come from? Again, that's going to be a time for another lecture, but this is us, the most recent species of Homo. When? Okay, so I say most recent. What you see is we overlapped with Homo neanderthalensis, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis. So there were a whole bunch of species existing at the same time, giving back to that idea that this was an adaptive radiation, not a single lineage. And there was, you can see there's times when there were several different species of Homo existing at the same time. You got Ergaster, Habilis, Rudolfensis, Australopithecus sediba, Paranthropus robustus, and Paranthropus boisei, all living at the same time, even with some Homo erectus. So there were times when there were 6 or 7 different species of hominid existing in Africa at the same, coexisting. There's currently one. So the diversity has definitely gone down lately, but we can see between 7 million years ago and now, there have been quite a few different lineages of humans, the most successful of which, the longest lived, was Homo erectus, that great tool user using fire and wandering around most of the globe. So you can't call it family tree or family line. It's family bush. The Paranthropus lineage was definitely something distinct from the other hominids. It's an experiment that we ran in where we tried to eat more veggies, and it didn't last it lasted for a good while, but it didn't work out very well for us. Niche partition definitely took a place in this. If there were 7 different species of Homo coexisting, they were partitioning out niches and eating very different things. And the extinctions may have been caused by climate change. We see that there were rough, tumultuous, climatic events around the times of the extinctions. Things like large droughts in Africa caused by the Rift Valley, caused by the rising of the Himalayas, caused by just weather patterns. You see ice ages and such causing extinctions. So whether it be drought, ice age, or a combination of the two, extinctions of Homo have happened plenty. So review those objectives. Is it more of a ladder or a bush? Well, we saw it's more of a bush. And I want you to be able to describe Paranthropus and describe what makes Homo, what's making this genus. When are the most hominid species on Earth? And when, of course, are there the least? So that's our rise of the planet of the humans. In a later lecture, we'll talk about the dawn of the planet of the humans, focusing much more on the genus Homo.